Hey guys, welcome into this first episode of the Discord chats. I'm here today with Coach Blanco, who has recently entered the tactical field via the college strength and conditioning industry, which we're starting to see is becoming a lot more prevalent. I know personally with running a internship with college students, something that's super important is making sure I have, as much information as I can to pass along to our interns because they might become interested in this side and this tactical area. So this is something I know that I'm looking forward to more so I can kind of use that information for our kids. But also I'm sure there's a lot of coaches out there that would kind of like to know a little bit more information. So Coach Blanco, if you want to go ahead and take it away a little bit, kind of about how you kind of got started and then kind of where you're at now.
Yeah. So like I said before, started kind of my journey during undergrad, did an internship at the University of Illinois football team, which kind of led me to grad school, not getting a GA position, but it was a strength conditioning program. So did that for a year and a half. And then as part of that program, had to do an internship. I decided to do mine at a private sports performance facility up in the Chicagoland area. And when I finished that up, a year later, I ended up kind of working for them. Enjoyed that, but really wanted to get back in the collegiate side, and was there for like the last 5 years. From there, really, I decided that hey, this opportunity kind of came across. After talking to a couple of people, kind of what it is that they do and kind of the day in the life type thing. I decided, hey, let's jump into it. And, about 5 months now kind of on the job, it's definitely something that's a pretty cool opportunity. And, it does have a lot of positives to it. While it's different from the collegiate side, there's definitely a lot of parallels, and there's still a lot to learn. I didn't really have any military background, friends or family or anything like that. So this is all like super new to me, and I'm still learning kind of as I go along. But yeah, just happy to share with y'all, kind of my experience so far.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have known each other for a while now, and something that I think is pretty interesting was you had an interesting position at McKendree where it was kind of blended, right? So talking a little bit how that was a unique situation and new for you, and then kind of how you're able to use that type of situation to help you in this new role in the tactical sector.
Yeah, I mean, with my previous position, for those who aren't familiar with me, I was in a sport coach role as well as an assistant strength conditioning coach. With my sport, it was powerlifting. So most would think like, oh, it's just a strength coach, teaching squat, bench, and deadlift and recruiting kids and blah, blah, blah. I mean, to me, like I'm pretty, obviously into that, but there was more to it. You got to deal with administrative stuff and, recruiting kids and everything that goes into being a sport coach on top of dealing with, several other teams. In my case, I think I had like 7 or 8 teams total, like including powerlifting, just about 200 kids that I was dealing with overall. And just being able to manage that many athletes at once, I mean, that really helped me here in my situation, which right now I really only oversee about 100 soldiers. So it's a lot less, but the chaos is kind of still the same in the sense of like you're dealing with a lot of moving parts, kind of on a regular basis, and learning how to manage that. Uh, you know, I would say from my experiences there too, like there were even instances where I'm training 2 teams at a time. And maybe smaller teams, but it like what I'm dealing with now. It's almost that exact situation where they're not maybe teams exactly, but the groups that I'm dealing with, they're doing two different things, and I got to be able to manage that kind of at the same time. So definitely grateful for my last stop with those experiences, because it's truly helped me a lot here.
Yeah, and I think that's something that if you don't work with teams, like working with 40 or 50 people all at the same time, to me seems a little easier than working with two or three teams where there's 10 people, in each, and they're completely doing different things. Because it might be one way with one team and another way with another team. And, a lot of times those kind of personalities crisscross. And I know for me, the biggest thing that I try to think about with this sector is that there has to be some pros and cons, right? When you're sitting down trying to make a decision, like, is this what I want to do with all those unknowns? What would you say are some of the bigger like pros and cons for going to the sector, or those thoughts that you're like, should I stay at this, college level?
I guess, are you asking within like programming, or just like dealing with like types of athletes, or like
Everything, just like pros and cons to like maybe your work day or what the programming looks like or stuff like.
I mean, definitely from a workday perspective. I mean, if you've been in the collegiate field for a minute, I mean, there's no such thing as like an 8-hour day, unless you work with one team only. That might be the case. That may not be the case. I don't really know, because I've never worked with just one team. But especially like smaller school coaches, you're dealing with multiple teams. You could have anywhere from a 10 to 14-hour day, depending on kind of what your schedule looks like. So from a work day, I mean, we are working the 8 hours, 5 days a week. Um, scheduled perspective, I mean, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Um, more often than not. And uh, our PT sessions, they're from 0630 to 08. So you're really getting an hour and a half to work with your group of soldiers that you work with. So a little bit less coaching. And then you might get some throughout the day that you might work with in smaller groups, if they're doing like extra PT or whatever. So it's definitely a lot less on the floor coaching than the collegiate side. But at the same time, like, you could be working with larger groups. So like I had mentioned, I work with up to 100 soldiers. I mean, that's a larger group than working with like a team of 20 or a team of 40, whatever sport you're dealing with. Um, so I mean, really, it's kind of up to you on how you look at that. Um, Same thing with the equipment. It's kind of up to you on how you look at it. But on my end, we work with what's called like a beaver fit. Well, that's the brand, but it's a little like Connex type uh, box, and it's got some benches, uh, barbells, kettlebells, bands, med balls. So you're really limited on the equipment that you're utilizing for your PT sessions, as compared to, if you are fortunate enough to be in a really nice facility, you have almost all the equipment you could really use. Obviously, for some smaller school coaches, that might not be the case either, but you probably have a better setup in terms of like, maybe spaces to run, or, um, X amount of racks, whatever the case may be. So you really have to be creative and kind of think outside the box on how to manage your group during these PT sessions. Um, I would say that those are kind of like the main ones right at the top of my head, on what that structure would look like kind of on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I think like something that I know when I'm trying to look into that, like how does it work? I'm trying to imagine how it would work and relative to what I know within working with either private sector or college. And it sounds like it's almost unique at every different base too. It's not even like very like you're working out of one of those Beaver Fit storage containers, and I know other coaches who have brand new facilities because it's something that's super new. So, I mean, to think that you're walking into, and see, that's something I didn't know either. And I think thinking that you're walking into like a Taj Mahal and you're going to have everything you want, and like I mean, I imagine there's just like in college sector, like there's that little lower budget type places where they're starting something from scratch new, like a lot of these programs are. And like you have to be able to do a lot with very little, and you almost like prove that you can do that, and then you kind of get the flashy new stuff. Um, and something that I was trying to work through, and I think you might, when I'm thinking about kind of like your work day, do you have your teams that are coming in, or is it more like scheduled as far as like with your people? Are they working with you directly to come in and find a time like you would maybe work with students who have class schedules, or like what's the required time that they need to be in there as part of like their soldier work day?
Yeah, so I mean, everyone's doing PT from 6:30 to 8 a.m. They're required to do that. Obviously, each unit has a different coach that they work with. But right now, like we have kind of free reign to be able to run our programs kind of how we want. Obviously working with um, some of the soldiers, specifically the MFTs, they're called master fitness trainers, that each unit may have. And we kind of collaborate with them on how to develop the program, um, and as kind of how we see fit and where we might think they need certain areas to improve on. Um, but as far as like additional um, PT sessions, that's kind of ongoing. So really, it's about connecting with soldiers, building those relationships, saying, "Hey, here's what I have to offer. Um, are you looking to improve on anything specific?" It could be anything from like, "Hey, I'm trying to improve my ACFT score, my Army Combat Fitness score," um, or "Hey, I need to lose weight because that's going to help me improve these scores," whatever it is. But it's also like it's basically a big team. So it's not just strength coaches. It's um, dietitians and physical therapists and ATs and a cognitive performance specialist. So it's a group of us. So if a soldier like came to me, "Hey, I have this," I can go and point them to that resource, which you're not really going to have on the collegiate side of things. Obviously, from an injury standpoint, like, "Hey, go see the AT," like, you know. Um, but as far as like when it comes to like training and stuff like that, they're wanting additional stuff. It's just ongoing. It's not like, "Hey, we have X, Y, and Z going on this week. We're looking to do that kind of here at some point." I know, like you mentioned, there's different brigades that have different situations. So they might have that going on. They could have, yoga classes or, any classes geared towards, uh, specific training, that sort of thing outside of PT hours. So it's really going to be different on everyone's situation, wherever they're at.
Cool. Yeah, and when I'm thinking about programming for you, like, is it similar to how you guys would do it at the college or the private sector level or the high school level, where you identify your KPIs or your key performance indicators and you try to like kind of steer that program around that sport? Like, how does it work? How does programming work specifically for soldiers compared to like a football team?
I mean, you still look at the KPIs. So from a coach's perspective, you have to try and understand, um, based on your brigade, like what's their MOS. Like everyone's going to be different. Um, but on my end, really, a lot of it's just GPP stuff because you're not going to have the perfect periodization model system, whatever you want to, go about. But because there's always ongoing things. Like, I mean, we obviously see that in the collegiate side. A sport coach might be like, hey, like, I want to run practice early, or can I do this and do that? And next thing you know, they're cutting out lifting sessions. It's the exact same thing here, but it's not, it's more ongoing. So you might get that a little bit more frequently. So you're going to have to kind of move things around how you see fit. Um, and like the other thing too that kind of comes to mind, you probably might incorporate a deload a little bit more often, um, in the collegiate side, just because there's a little bit more fluidity there. Whereas like here, everything's changing constantly. So in terms of the need of a deload, not saying that they don't need it, but in terms of actually implementing it, they may not get it. So, or if they're whatever they're doing for their job, and they're gone for the week. All right, well, that's their deload. So it's automatically implemented. You don't even have to like think about, hey, I got to put this deload in the week. So just little things like that. But it is different, but it's more GPP based stuff. You're not peaking them, by any means. You're just kind of getting them ready to be able to do their physically do their job. So
Yeah, and I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around as far as like knowing a year schedule. So like training a football team, knowing that you're going to practice in the fall, do some practice, like there seems to be like some sort of schedule similar to that for your soldiers, or like they have specific, or are they still coming in to seeing you guys during, if they're doing any sort of specialized training where maybe they don't normally come in for PT? Like, does that kind of stuff happen, or is it kind of like you were talking about, kind of just wide open, super fluid? They might let them know last minute that's something they might be gone for a couple weeks for some sort of specialized training or stuff like that.
yeah, it's kind of fluid, but if they have something like important going on, that might be a little bit planned more ahead of time, like a month or two's three notice, depending on the time of the year. Like they'll have things going on throughout the year. But on our end, like I said, we just kind of have to go with the flow and make those adjustments. So it's really not like, hey, this is how I can lay out my program for the year. You can, but you're going to have to adjust for it. So it's going to be more work doing all that and then having to like scrap things and change things. So it's gonna be more progression. So like on my end, just getting them to do a proper like squat pattern. I've progressed into like a landmine squat. Would I like them to get to a barbell squat? Sure, but I don't think that um, that'll happen here anytime soon, just because I'd rather get them to learn that movement, load that pattern, and then, get them efficient and build that skill, and then say, hey, maybe like in a month or two, this is where we can go. Obviously, some individuals are going to be more advanced than others. So then that's where I can say, hey, this is too easy for you. Here's the next progression. And I can do that on the spot. And you still do that on the collegiate side, but you probably don't do that as frequent.
Yeah, and I think like it's a lot harder at that level, especially when you have freshmen come in. Like you want to start everybody on that, the block zero, as everybody calls it. But like, I guess that was going to be my next question: is how do you think the level of differences in athletes when it comes to the sectors that you've worked before compared to the soldiers now? Do you see a lot more of like more entry level, or are a lot more of them athletes that are switching into being soldiers, or like what's so far have you seen as far as like the split goes from a skill perspective?
I mean, on my end, and again, it could be different at each brigade and different bases. But like for me personally, I'm dealing with a lot of soldiers who just don't even have that athletic background. So they have literally zero training age. So I'm starting from scratch and being able to build them up. Obviously, some of them do have an athletic background, but I'd say generally speaking, most of them don't. So I'm learning them, or I'm teaching them how to learn how to squat, how to hinge, push, pull, everyone's favorites, but at a super, you know, basic level with the equipment that I have. So again, you know, it has its challenges, but it's fun, and getting them to know why some of these movements are important and just getting them to apply that to like their jobs. Um, I think they pick up on that, versus, you probably couldn't make that argument as well. Like, hey, like you need to learn how to squat for a sport, or you need to know how to pick this item up. Whereas like guys I'm dealing with, I mean, that's part of their job. They're doing all these movement patterns, most of them, and that's going to help them kind of keep them healthy and get stronger. So.
No, yeah, and I think that's something, again, like it's wild that that's something that's super important now. You think about that's what they do on a daily basis, and how that's not been something that's been super like pushed until now. And obviously they're getting, some of the top coaches like you who are doing great jobs at the college level, who can now take that and kind of move it and use it for those athletes. And I think it's something that's super cool, that's new, and it just sounds like it's kind of different for everybody, like very similar to how the sector is. So has there been any like maybe things that you kind of thought about going in that you think it would be a specific way and it's been completely different, or you heard about that was a little bit different than you kind of expected going into it? Or has it been like, did you kind of have like an open mind going into it?
I was pretty open-minded, because I didn't know what I was going to get into. But for me, like I said previously, like I have like zero experience when it comes to the military. So I didn't have friends, family, or anything to like learn any of these things. So based on my knowledge, it's like, oh, I'm like watching movies and stuff like that, and you just automatically assume that that's what the military everywhere, regardless of branch, is like, and that's definitely not the case. I didn't expect to have more of the soldiers that I work with, kind of like I said, that with that lower training age, but that's not an issue. It's just I wasn't expecting that, to be quite honest. So, but it's awesome to see, because now you have them, kind of starting from scratch, so to speak, and be able to build them up from there. So I think that's probably the cooler part about this, is to be able to see their progress over time.
Yeah. And how about as far as like coaches themselves? So like other coaches that you work with, I know we have in our Discord a tactical SIG, and if you work in the side of things or are interested, that would be a great place to kind of get some information. But how have like other coaches been that have been in this tactical field been with like expressing how it works there, and kind of piggyback off on some of this that they do? How has that been similar to how some college strength coaches are?
I think it's been a lot more open discussion, just because the majority of us are really new, and it might even be in my position where like maybe they have like zero knowledge of the military prior to kind of getting into this. Not saying everyone does, but just everyone's learning something along the way, from day one. And I can't tell you, like, I really haven't, like, every single day, like, I've learned something new. I know that's kind of an overused phrase, but like for me, like that's been a reality for sure. And just being able to connect with other coaches, even here where I'm at, just learning from other coaches in different brigades, like, hey, what are y'all doing? What's your experience like? What have you found things that worked that didn't work? Um, and you can actually take those things and possibly apply it to what you're doing, and that might be quite the opposite, where like something that didn't work for them might work for you, or vice versa. Um, and I'm not saying this happened with all collegiate coaches that I came across, but you would sometimes see it where like people wouldn't be as open, um, kind of vague about sharing what they do and their success and things like that. I'm not here to bash anyone. It just, I've had instances like that. Whereas like here, everyone's been super open, super helpful. And it's just, as a smaller community, um, everyone's willing to help each other out.
So with getting into this like tactical field, have you seen, has there been like a new trajectory for, like, let's say someone who's just graduating college? Are you seeing that a lot of people are going straight into the tactical field, or like interning has, I don't know if I've seen a lot of like internships for the tactical field. Like, I'm trying to think of how can like entry level type coaches like get involved into the tactical side of things?
So I've seen a couple of internships so far since I've taken this job. Um, each one has been different. Um, I didn't like read like the like qualifications or descriptions or anything like that, so it's hard to say like what is expected of them just to be able to intern with them. So I don't want to speak on that, but I will say at least from kind of the project I'm on, H2F, like from what I've seen, there's like a 3-year experience um, minimum in terms of kind of getting into it. So I would say like for those like wanting to jump in, you might have to have a little bit of experience under your belt prior to trying to jump into this. I really don't know what that looks like down the line, but at least from the initial like startup here, um, it looks like that's kind of been like what the minimum qualifications are. Probably not something that like people wanted to hear, but I think that does help, at least on our end. Like, hey, what's your experience been like? Um, and then being able to kind of transition into that role.
No, yeah, and that's just, again, that's one of those things that I haven't seen or heard, and then I reading posts and I see those job applications, and you're right, they have all been about had that 3-year minimum, basically to prove that you have some experience working with athletes. So I think that might be something interesting to kind of come, as far as how is it going to progress, if that's going to be kind of like a barrier to entry, or are those contracts going to start opening up a little bit to kind of have those more tactical specific minds kind of jumping in, instead of stealing all the good coaches away from the college side and the private side, to basically do all their bidding. But I don't know, nothing to see. I know for me, like, I'm excited to see that side of the sector grow, because it's something new for us to kind of talk about with our interns. And anytime the industry can kind of expand is always great for, the rest of the coaches who are, sticking around.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think it it will kind of be a branch of its own that, kind of really grows here over the next several years, and be awesome to see kind of where everything goes.
Yeah, so a little bit, something that also might be a little bit different, thinking about it for coaches who may or may not know how it works. Like when we sign contracts, at the college level, you sign it based on mainly to make sure that you're getting the pay that you're supposed to be getting. But what is a little bit different as far as when you work for the military side of things, being a contractor compared to like a full-time type, like benefited position as at the university level? Like, what are some of those differences that you've kind of seen?
I really obviously the pay scale is different. And I think we're definitely fairly compensated. I know that's been a hot topic here on the collegiate side, that coaches are undervalued and underpaid. And, there's definitely some truth to that. But the hours, like I touched on, we got to be strict on that. We're working on 40 hours, each week. Whereas like the collegiate side, it's like, it doesn't matter, what you get paid yearly. Like you got to do your job, and whatever that is, 50, 60, 70, 80 hour weeks, like it is what it is. But yeah, I'd say those are the two differences there.
Okay. Well, with your kind of like extra free time, and I know, like, I think a lot of people might kind of hear like 40 hours a week, like, how is he not working 70? Like, he's not doing anything all day. But people need to realize too that when you are able to have that amount of time and you can kind of get like laser focused in on working with that specific group of people and being like super specialized. I know, like, with my situation, being the only strength coach here on staff, like, it's hard for me to be able to do the specialized training that I'd like to do, like have some stuff that's a little bit different for each team. And I try to do a little bit of that, but realizing that the coaching side of things is taking more of my time. And at some point I have to put my foot down or my wife might divorce me, but I have to make sure that, like, I'm able to get the job done, but like, it's almost like a sliding scale, like something has to give. And for me, it's a little less of that individualized programming. Because I think at the end of the day, like, the exercises themselves, if you pick the right exercises in training, like, should elicit the response that we're looking for. So is there any like big projects that you're kind of working on, or like some new stuff that you kind of, with some extra time, EU wise or stuff like that, you're kind of diving into?
Yeah. We always have things going on, like as a staff, that projects that we're working on, collaborating with other pillars like PTs and ATs and dietitians. So just, work with them on whatever they have going on or we want to collaborate on. Myself learning about, getting a soldier here prepped for Ranger school. So again, learning everything it takes for them on the physical side of things, all the tests that they have to pass. Like, it's new to me, and learning how to approach that and helping them get ready for that. So that's one kind of big thing I'm working on at the moment. And then just basically, kind of getting my unit, my company, my battery, I don't know, all interchangeable there. Kind of on that right path, like kind of month to month, based off of some of the trends I'm seeing, the data that we've collected on that over the past couple months. So it's not just like, oh, he's only coaching for, a handful of hours a day. It's still ongoing projects with meetings, things like that. So yeah, it's less coaching, but you still are putting quite a bit of work in throughout the week.
Yeah, and some of those, like something that I kind of popped into my mind when you're talking about is like we have the high performance model, right? Try super alongside training. Has that seemed to be something that's a little bit easier, right? You're at the private set, or I'm sorry, at the tactical side of things, or I know that's always like a pipe dream for us. Like we always say we want to do the high performance model, but I mean, unless your weight room and the athletic training room are essentially the one big room, it's almost impossible to really do that. So is that something that seems to be a little bit more realistic at that tactical level, or?
Yeah, I would say so. To a degree, like I said, we have our physical therapists, our athletic trainers, our dietitians, and basically our sports psych. But when it comes to like dietitians and our sports psych, we only have a limited amount versus like our ATs and PTs, we're going to have more of, and coaches more of. Um, and like I said, each brigade is different, but when it comes to like, hey, sending them to a certain area, you know, let's say if I send someone to PTs, there's going to be more people to help them out. Whereas like if I have a soldier and I got to send them to like our dietitian, there's only two of them, right? So I can't take my whole, group and send them over there because they're just not going to be able to handle them like all individually.
Yeah.
So in that case, like depending on what is needed, it'll be more of a kind of general topic that they cover versus like an individual need. But if someone is in need of something individually, depending on what it is, like then they'll definitely get that help. So it is a high performance model, but to an extent, like not everyone's going to always have access to that. Um, they have to work around schedules and stuff. So
Yeah, that's super interesting for me. I mean, it's just something, again, like, and it kind of sounds like, based on what you're saying, it almost sounds like it's so new that it's kind of changing day by day. Like, there's not a lot of people like we can look to, can go and look at what Cal Dietz does, and I can go look at what Mike Boyle does, and I can try to read, like, take pieces that I kind of paving your own path. And just like you would when you started off as an intern, trying to actually learn those sports and what you can do to kind of elicit the responses that you want, you have to do that now. It's just, again, even if you had some sort of background in tactical, like there would still be that piece of, I need to make sure I'm understanding exactly what's going on if they do go to Ranger School or RIP or whatever it is, that you have that understanding, because like you're not getting them ready for game day, like you're getting them ready for their work day. And then if they have to make sure they're passing some sort of physical test, that gets done as well. So I know for me, that's super helpful. And I know for anybody who's out entry level type coaches, like, make sure that we're putting the work in. And if you are interested in the tactical side of things, like reach out to the good coach who would be willing to talk to you about kind of what their day looks like, and kind of painting like a well-rounded picture on kind of what it looks like for you when you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to talk to a couple people, and they got to, walk me through their experience. But that was different than what I'm doing now. Not that anything is like different in a bad way. It's just you have to be open and kind of figuring it out, like kind of as you go along. If you're not familiar with the, military side of things.
Yeah. All right. My last question before we get out of here is, who are some of the tactical sector folks that you kind of look like and talk to a little bit more, or you kind of try to lean on if you have any questions, or some good people to maybe follow on social media to kind of see what they're doing, that you kind of look up to in this sector?
I got a buddy, Justin Kuhn, out in JBLM out in Washington. He got onto the project prior to me. So I kind of was able to, pick his brain, and I still pick his brain on, what he's doing and what I want to do. I haven't had the chance yet to reach out to Mike Carroll. I know he's another guy who switched to the tactical side. So he would always be a good resource to go to, both collegiate side too and tactical side. Those two, I would say, are good ones off the top of my head.
Cool. Awesome. Well, hey, Coach, I appreciate your time. And again, if this is something that you're interested in, you should check out that Tactical SIG. Coach Blanco's in there. Make sure you guys are, interacting. And if there's anything else we can do, just shoot me a message on the Discord. Thanks again.